Regatta.
So, if I had to tell you about a real life first aid situation, something that really sticks with me.
Oh, that is a bright light. So if I had to tell you guys about a first aid scenario that kind of sticks out in my mind from my personal experience.
It'd have to be an occasion that happened to me at my actual home back in, it'd be 1996, I believe it was. I returned home from work. And when I returned home from work, my next door neighbour ran over to me very distressed, saying that he believed his brother was ODing on the front lawn.
Is when my son was quite little. He was maybe 2 or 3. And I was living in the US at the time. I was working full-time in the fitness industry and had just done my first aid certificate.
Straight away, I called my wife, because she happened to be home, and asked her to grab me my gloves and of course my CPR mask before I would start, and asked her also to call 000 for them to actually attend. When this actually happened, I grabbed my gloves, grabbed my mask, went over to the actual individual, who was now, when I arrived, unconscious and non-responsive, laying on his back.
Which I think is really valuable for parents. And my son started choking on a hard lolly that he was eating. And my husband said, "Oh my gosh, he's choking," but wasn't sure what to do.
As a result of this, going through my doctor's ABCD, of course always assessing for danger first, looking to see if there was an actual response, asking those questions that everybody knows, then putting on my gloves, which my wife had given me, along with my CPR resuscitation mask with me. Check for any response, the normal response we look for, of course. Can you hear me? Open your eyes. Squeeze my hands to see if there's any response from the individual. Then, of course, the next thing I'm looking for is to check to see if there is anything in the mouth. I tilt the head slowly, having a look in there. I didn't notice there was actually anything in there.
So luckily I knew exactly what to do. Picked him up, flipped him upside down, gave him one back blow, and the lolly came straight out and he was fine.
We then checked for breathing with our look, listen and feel, after which I actually commenced doing CPR along with the 2 breaths required as part of that resuscitation, using that resuscitation mask. I think of one thing for myself is this is probably the 3rd indication where this had happened to me. And on this particular time, I made sure I actually had that mask, an actual mask that has a non-return valve. I typically won't go and do breaths if, for instance, someone is I don't have a mask or a face shield just because of infection control, thinking about those type of things also. So I started doing my compressions at the rate, of course, 30 and 2. And the one thing is to let everybody know is that it's great to get your CPR training. It's very important to have these things, I think, for everybody, whether it happens to be a friend or family member. And when a situation arises, like I'm talking about here, you're able to act, even if that's just in the point of remembering, check for danger, and you're calling 000 if that is what is actually required in the situation. As I'm doing my CPR, carrying on with the breaths, I was extremely fortunate in this instance. The ambulance had arrived within about 15 minutes of my wife calling them. The paramedics arrived to the scene. First thing they said to me was, "Are you okay to keep going? We're just going to grab all their equipment," meaning they're grabbing their BVM or their bowel valve mask, the ones they sort of have that has a squeeze thing attached to it that you typically see for them, the oxygen and of course the defib unit. They've then come over, they've hooked everything up. I've continued to do my CPR under the direction from the actual paramedic. At that particular time, the paramedic has run through, done the tests and everything they've had to do, and they've asked me the question, "Are you related to this individual or do you know them at all?" I've responded and said, "No, I do not. My understanding is it is my next door neighbour's brother and it was as a result of a possible overdose," which is what my neighbour had told me at the actual time when he actually ran first up to me. They then turned around and said to me, "Okay, we believe this person has passed. We would like you to continue with your CPR. We will move them into the ambulance and follow the rest of our procedures from this position forward." So from the particular point, I continue to do the CPR. They've then moved them via a stretcher onto a stretcher into the ambulance and continue with their procedures as they headed off to hospital.
But my advice to all parents is, man, if you can just know what to do by doing your first aid certificate, really, really valuable.
If it's a lesson I learned to take from this is, again, in this instance, I was lucky in the way of that, even though the neighbour's brother was quite distressed, he was being comforted by his partner, which I think was a big help. There wasn't sort of any interaction, which in some cases you can get bystanders that may want to, and especially when it's a family member, they can be, sometimes inhibit what you're trying to do. In this particular station, I was very fortunate, and that didn't actually occur. So I think the one thing that I take away from this is that someone will be there to assist you. Someone will always be there. You can always call 000. They will arrive. Sometimes it may take some time because it depends on a myriad of factors for them, like how far away you are, what traffic is like, all these other things. But you being there on site to provide that initial care can really make a difference in helping to try and save somebody's life. Now, in this instance, from what I was informed later, unfortunately, this particular individual did not make it. However, it hasn't stopped me from continuing to do CPR. And unfortunately for me, I've had to do this 7 times in real life situations. This is just one of those particular stories.